Hello, and welcome to this WomenHeart live interview. I'm Selena Gora, the CEO of WomenHeart. WomenHeart is a national patient-centered organization that provides support, education, and advocacy to women living with or at risk of heart disease. We're here today, just a few days before Mother's Day, to have a conversation about heart health across the generations. There's so much about our heart health that is linked to where we come from, our culture, our family traditions, the lifestyle that we grew up in, and our habits. And things like what we eat, how we exercise, when we exercise. These are all so often influenced by our families, often by our mothers specifically. And for many women, we pass that down to our children. Add to that family health history and our genetics play a big part in our overall health. So when it comes to heart disease, these factors are especially critical. 80% of heart disease is preventable, which means that it's especially important that we understand our risk factors. We understand what we can control, like diet and exercise, and what we can't control, like our family history. So a great place to start is by talking about these factors with our family members. Today, I'm so pleased to welcome one of our wonderful WomenHeart champions, Lori Wood, and her daughter, Emily. Happy Mother's Day to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a treat to have a conversation with the both of you about having these conversations in general in the family setting about heart health and how that has played out for both of you and between the two of you. I'm guessing they've changed over the years, especially Lori, after you were diagnosed with heart failure in 2015. So maybe that's a good place for us to start. Maybe, Laura, if you can begin by telling us a little bit about your heart story.
Sure. So as you mentioned, in 2015, this all started, and I went to my family doctor with what I thought was the flu. And I ended up spending 14 days in cardiac ICU at my local hospital. The funny thing is, 3 weeks before that, I had a medical evaluation, and I was told that I have less than 3% chance of ever developing heart disease.
Wow.
So, when I walked in there, I had no risk factors, no known family history, low cholesterol, low blood pressure. And I was suddenly diagnosed with end-stage heart failure, idiopathic, which means they don't really know what the cause was. My enlarged heart was functioning at just 6%, and I had no idea. So I was flown to Cleveland Clinic, and I became my doctor's most critical patient for about a year and a half. And during that time, I wore a life vest, which is an external defibrillator. And I titrated a lot of medications and got to the maximum dosages. And then in 2016, I was implanted with a CRTD, which is a biventricular pacemaker, a 3-lead pacemaker with an internal defibrillator. And then 2 months before Emily was married, just out of the blue, my heart was restored to normal function in 2017.
Wow.
But, as heart failure goes, with those of you that have it, 3 years after that, I was, my heart function dropped and I was in active heart failure again. So because heart failure is a chronic progressive disease, for the most part, medical science can manage the symptoms and sometimes they can slow the progression. But right now, there really is no cure. So that's kind of where I'm at and dealing with and just taking my meds, trying to watch diet, trying to walk, getting rest and those kind of things.
Wow, Lori, thank you so much for sharing that. What a roller coaster it sounds like it's been for you. Emily, I'd like to turn to you now. I mean, because I'm sure that those months were not easy for you or your family. And I'm sure that it was especially shocking since, we see, and your mom is the picture of health, so this diagnosis probably seemed like it was coming from nowhere, and with obviously with few real recognizable symptoms or risk factors. Can you talk a little bit about how you grew up, and what the relationship was in your family to health and lifestyle? And has heart health been something that your mom and you have ever talked about specifically? And Lori, please feel free to chime in as you wish.
Yeah, absolutely. So in many ways, we were raised with a really healthy lifestyle. All of us kids played sports. There was always a vegetable on the table for every meal. If you would have asked me at the time, really any time growing up, I would have said that absolutely we grew up with health front and center.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
1 second. I remember my parents like cheering us on at sports games. I remember us kids cheering my dad on as he ran marathons, which to me at the
Wow.
time was like, wow, the human body should not be able to do these things. Like
Yeah.
we really were like such a healthy family. Looking back, I think that what has been missing not only for our family but for a lot of families is just conversations about like why we do these things, or how sometimes you can look and act perfectly healthy on the outside and then still have a health issue on the inside that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I think it's compounded. It's so complicated, right? Because so many of our health guidelines and standards are based on how, like, one type of person, and usually a white man, presents symptoms and how they react to medications and how they receive medical care. And then female bodied people oftentimes have an entirely different set of symptoms, which is what we saw with my mom. So, like, yeah, for example, I thought I knew from school, what a heart attack looks like. But it turns out that that's not how it looks for so many people. Yeah, and then just we didn't talk about a lot about the health problems of our grandparents or other people in
Mm-hmm.
our family. A lot of that was, I mean, my mom can speak to this better than I can, but I just always think that it wasn't really a conscious choice, but like a subconscious one, because you don't want to be scary to your kids and talk about things that might make them think that the world is a really scary place to live in, or that their bodies are scary places to live.
Right.
Talking about gender disparities in healthcare is like super sticky and complicated, right? And learning about symptoms and health stories of other people in our family in the future will be a major way of encouraging a healthy lifestyle for our family moving forward.
Thanks for that, Lori. I mean, Emily, is there anything you want to add to that, Lori?
Yeah, I mean, she's completely right. I think if I were to look back at my time as a mom with kids at home raising them, some of the things we didn't do that we could have done a better job at was just reading labels. We didn't do that. We were like, got to get to soccer practice, got to get to choir, got to get to this. So, whatever was easy and quick, like Emily said, we tried to, have a salad, have a vegetable, but we always weren't conscious of everything that was going into our body. And,
Mhm.
that's something if I could go back and do differently, I sure would.
Okay. As I mentioned before, while lifestyle has played a critical role, obviously family history does as well. And so we're always sort of encouraging women to learn about their family heart histories. And that's what you two have just talked about. Lori, how has your experience sort of played into your thinking and your conversations with your own parents, or folks that came before you?
Right. So, growing up, I was never aware that heart disease was in my family history at all. I was keenly aware of cancer of all sorts. And I've always been diligent about getting a mammogram and skin cancer screening and pap smears and colonoscopies and biopsies and all of that.
Yeah.
My mother had breast cancer twice, and she had colon cancer. My dad had two different kinds of. He had. I just lost the name of it, but he had a cancer, and then he also had lung cancer, which is what
Wow.
he died from. But heart disease was just not something that ever made our radar.
Mm.
And, mom and dad, I think because mom and dad didn't think it was a thing growing up. Um, But then after I was diagnosed, we did do kind of a deep dive into family connections through a genetic study that we did with Ohio State University. We took part in that. And it was, so I'm in my 50s at that point, and it was only then that I learned that both of my parents were being treated for high blood pressure, which I didn't know that. But at that time, even knowing that, I attributed that to the fact that they had been smokers most of their lives. Then in 2020, my mother passed away, and they determined that that was from heart failure. But she was being treated, or that issue was being treated as a pulmonary issue.
Oh, wow.
And then on my husband's side of the family, his mother, he lost his mother to a major heart attack when she was just 62. And even though those two, my mother and my mother-in-law, died 20 years apart, they shared the sad story that both of them had been in to see their cardiologist on the day they died.
Oh my goodness.
And they were both sent home with the understanding that the problem and the symptoms they were having was not cardiac related. So, that's just a sad thing, but it's something I think we need to, be aware of, especially as Emily mentioned about, disparities with women. And so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole notion of delayed diagnosis, misdiagnosis, or just no diagnosis, and sounds like in these two cases is really something that is at the core of what WomenHeart is fighting against and trying to raise up awareness about. Did your family ever talk about those health issues prior, or is that something that has started to come into your conversation as a family more and more now?
Yeah, we did not, growing up, we really didn't talk much about medical information at all. And I think part of that is, like I mentioned, I think mom and dad both thought that nearly all of their health problems was because they had been smokers. And since none of us children were smokers, they thought, well, we're out of the woods,
Yeah.
and that we wouldn't have the problems that they had. And they did warn us about smoking, which apparently we listened because none of us are smokers now, but
Yeah.
just not in general. And it wasn't until really after I was diagnosed with heart failure that I really became more aware of the symptoms to be looking for and the signs that, should be a sign of trouble. One of the things I did advocate for my mother to see a cardiologist near the end of her life, because a lot of the symptoms that she was experiencing were so similar to my own that I did advocate for that. And I have talked to my family. My husband had a pretty severe case of COVID last year, and he's had some heart-related issues that have brought up some more conversations. And I've tried to talk to my children about it, and I think especially my daughters, for the same reasons that we're talking about, to just be watching out, because a lot of times you're the only person that are going to see them. You're the only person that are going to be able to identify them. When Emily was pregnant last year, we talked again about peripartum cardiomyopathy. And, since my own case of heart failure the cause was never determined, I just want them to make sure that they're aware and they see the signs, even if it's not genetic, maybe it's a lifestyle thing that we're passing down. But either way, just to be aware that that's something that can sneak up on you.
Yeah, it just sort of really brings home this point that conversations may be uncomfortable and may be difficult, but they still need to be had. And especially in the context of the diagnostic journey, which is what I think we're talking about here today, is really understanding what it means to continuously have that conversation so that you're aware about, I think Emily said it so well, about your own bodies and what's happening internally. We know that women are more likely to be misdiagnosed or to receive a delayed diagnosis of heart disease, again, with your stories being really important examples of that. We hear stories all the time of women being sent home from the ER or told they're stressed, or which is in and of itself, an important thing to look at. But and the fact that both of your mother and your mother-in-law had seen their cardiologist, that to me is just, so glaring of an issue that continues to need attention. Needing rest. Yes, we all need rest, but many of these women are in fact having heart attacks, and it's not being recognized. Because I think so many don't think that women have heart disease, which is this very bizarre, I call it the Hollywoodization of heart disease, right? Because we think of, a middle-aged white man clutching his chest, and that's sort of all that we look for. We sort of miss all of these other ways that heart disease presents itself. So obviously knowing your family history and being able to say to the doctor, these are the symptoms I have, and linking that to maybe symptoms or a diagnosis that a parent has had, especially if they experience these things at a very young age. All of these things are really important and powerful to bring in to the doctor's visit with you. In my case, in my own family, my mom died of colon cancer at 39. So every single doctor that I talk to knows that fact, because it is so important in my genetic history. But I want to turn to you, Emily. I understand that you're a new mom to a baby girl, Hazel. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How has your mom's health and that of your grandmother's influenced your own life, and how do you plan on addressing heart health, especially since that you've recently gone through a pregnancy? And maybe I would also add, how do you think it will influence how you raise your daughter specifically, and more generally your kids, and what conversations do you think you'll have with her in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. My mom is the strongest person that I know, hands down. And I think that most of the people who have heard her story or had the pleasure of having a conversation with her before know that it was highly likely that she was like significantly suffering for years
Mm,
before she was diagnosed with heart disease, before any of us kids, thought that there was anything wrong at all. When she initially came in, they were like floored that she had walked herself in to the hospital just based on her heart function. And so, as I'm considering the overwhelming task of being a mother to my own baby girl now, first and foremost, I know the strength of my mom is something that I'm always really going to be striving to emulate. And, strength not only for myself, but also for her, and strength to have these conversations that we're talking about. I've learned through her journey too that a part of that has to include those tricky, direct conversations that we've been talking
yeah,
about,
yeah,
specifically around health and all aspects of health, even when it might be easier to pretend like the risks don't exist, because there is such a strong through line within our family. I know that by telling baby Hazel and child Hazel and teenage Hazel about the women in our family who came before her will not only will definitely not lead her to think that they were weak, or that there was something wrong with the people in our family, but rather that those lives and stories are just another gift to her. Even the women like her great grandmothers that she should have met and did not, because of heart health and because of the way that heart health in women is treated in America.
Lori, I can't help but think that you must be so proud of Emily as a new mom. Can you talk a little bit about how you come in now to this role of grandmother, and sort of what that's going to mean for the 3 generations that get to spend some time together?
Yes. Oh, it's, you hear people talk about being a grandparent, forget about it. It's you just don't understand until you're there. And
Mm,
there's just something about being part of, something that's going to be there when you're gone. And you know that, and you can see that life that's,
yeah,
a little bit in some small way, a part of you. And then to see your own child be a mother is just such a blessing, because it's just, you know, and as you're talking to Emily, you're getting the sense that she's very intentional. She's she's a great mother, and I knew that she would be. And to see it playing out now is just it's like a dream come true. It really is. And um, I'm just so glad to be able to see that and to just play a little part in Hazel's life and in Hazel's upbringing because she's in such good hands with her mom and dad. But it's a blessing.
Yeah, I can really see that. I think I definitely picked up on Emily your intentionality and the thoughtfulness that I think you really bring to this conversation, which is a serious conversation, right? And I think that there is, and yet at the same time, I also feel the lightness. So I have every confidence that you're going to be able to bring that to your conversations with Hazel in the future. And you know, the fact that you do have the strongest woman you know around you, you know, I think that's really an important, I think, cheerleader that you've got in your corner. So I'm looking forward to seeing pictures of Hazel as she grows up as well. Um, Before we close, I mentioned in the introduction that Lori is a Women Heart champion, and so for us, we are intentional in calling our volunteers champions because really to us, you know, our champions are way more than just volunteers. I mean, you have gone through hours and hours of training by the top cardiologists in this country and other faculty at the Mayo Clinic to learn how to understand heart disease better, to understand specifically heart disease in the context of women in heart disease, to provide peer support in community education and to tell your story. And I see Hazel's joined us.
Yes, she had to come see her Marmar.
Oh, are you
And
Marmar, Lori? Are you Marmar?
And that right there is the reason that awareness of women's heart issues took on a huge leap for me in the last couple months. So that little heart right there is super important to me. So, and renewed vigor for this.
Absolutely. And talk a little bit more, Lori, just about what it's meant to you to be part of the Women Heart community of Heart Sisters.
Yes. You know, I think being able to hear from and speak to someone who has walked the road that you're walking is such a gift. You know, medical professionals are great, and sometimes the internet is okay and helpful, but there's nothing like hearing from someone like a real live person who has firsthand experience and they care enough to volunteer to come alongside you in real time. And it would be my dream for every woman that's diagnosed with heart disease to be part of the sister match and have someone who is there for them, who they can text or call and say, this is happening. Is this weird? Have you ever felt this way? What should I expect? So it's just like having someone there to ask all the hard questions and know you're going to get a real firsthand response. And so I just can't say enough about what Women Heart does for advocacy, but also for the Sister Match program and all of the outreach they do to just bring, you know, patient to patient is just the sweet spot. And I think it's invaluable.
Wow, thank you so much for sort of bringing that to life for our audience. You know, I often think about what we stand for as an organization, and I want to come back to the word that you used to describe Emily, intentionality. That I think that really is a wonderful way of thinking about how women like you who've survived a diagnosis show up. You have all the intention in the world to make other lives better because you know yourself what it was like to go through that. And I think that is why women come to us every year to be trained, to join the sisterhood with you, Lori, and others. And it's why we have been around for 22 years. You know, as we head into this weekend of Mother's Day, and I'm so excited, Emily, that this is your first Mother's Day, and that's going to be so fun. But I want to also encourage everyone to find time to talk to your families, to learn about the heart health of your grandparents, your aunties, your cousins, like you all have already started to do in your family, Lori. And understanding that you may be at risk is an important piece of information so that you can be intentional about how you move going forward. What will motivate you to make changes big and small, right? To live a life that's more heart healthy. That can mean finally going to the doctor, knowing your numbers, buying a blood pressure cuff. It means adding maybe a daily walk to your routine. My dogs are kind of, chomping at the bit because they haven't gone for their walk yet. It could also mean cutting salt, which is a really big part, I think, of maintaining a healthy heart. So, I think so much of what we've discussed with the two of you today, and the three of you now that Hazel's joined us, is really about what it means to have intentionality in having these conversations in the context of family. Knowing your heart health is absolutely, and knowing the history of your family is absolutely the first step in understanding what steps you can take to maintain your health. So I want to say thank you again to Lori and Emily and Hazel. Happy Mother's Day to you and to all the moms and aunts and grandmothers, godmothers, and other maternal figures out there. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank
having us.
you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.